Look, it's hard to believe that it's been 9 years.
What a horrifying and terrifying scene.
A few dozen people
Staff Sergeant Wyatt,
came here on a hot July morning.
Lance Corporal Wells.
All of a sudden, we were totally rocked by something that no one ever saw coming.
To remember 5 service members killed just a few paces from this place 9 years ago.
Sergeant Homequest.
There's one thing for certain. Everyone, past, present, and future, that raises their right hand entering the military service, at that moment writes a blank check to the United States of America for the amount up to and including their lives.
Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan.
If you were here when this happened, you'll likely never forget these images or where you were when you learned the news.
Logistics Specialist, Second Class Smith.
But if you weren't here, there's a good chance you never heard the story in the first place.
I was actually talking to one of my buddies here at work about how many times, especially here at the VA in Johnson City Mountain Home, VA, how many people do not even know about this event that occurred in Chattanooga. When I was in Quantico, how many psychiatrists that I saw that did not know about the event in Chattanooga.
Over the last 9 years, there have been events to remember the 5 men killed in Chattanooga on July 16th. Most of those events have come and gone. Mickey McCamish and others here started this new tradition today, and they plan to do this every year from this day forward.
It's hugely important. It should happen 100 years from now.
We will never forget. God bless.
We needed to remember the fallen 5, to remember and honor the fallen 5. And I felt that we perhaps might be slipping away from that, and that we need to do every year that we need to have a remembrance program for the fallen 5.
Let's start with this, man. 9 years tomorrow. What are your thoughts when you think about that? It's been 9 years since that happened.
Like you said, it's been 9 years. I mean, time flies. It does. It seemed, I relive the whole thing in my head every day. It's not like that it goes away ever. And I know 10 years obviously is next year. So, I'm wanting to do something next year for the 10-year, anniversary of everything there in Chattanooga. So I'm trying to get some stuff together to try to hold something there next year for the remembrance of the fallen 5. And God, 9 years, man. I mean, it's time flies. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Through the years, the last 9 years on the date or around the date, is there something specific that you do in memory of the brothers you lost, or connect with folks who were there, and anything specific that you've been doing the last few years on the date?
Well, to be honest, it kind of involves a little bit of whiskey. So we do 5 shots, but I keep in contact with Jasmine Holmquist a lot and talk to her and a couple of other guys that were there during the whole thing. And it's just who I am. I keep in contact with pretty much everybody that was stationed there for the most part. And I've been down to Chattanooga a few times. I've been to the reefs over there by the river and stuff. I went there last year, hung out there for a little while, just kind of remembering everything and reflecting on everything. It's the whole facility has changed a lot in itself. I took my wife down there to get her ID card redone, and we had to go inside, and it was the first time I've been back in there since I left. And it's pretty much the same, except for the Navy side's changed a lot. So
That must have been a heavy feeling walking in that place again.
it was, had to take a pretty deep breath when I went in, but everything was fine. Everything's okay. So, we do miss our guys that we lost that day, but all I can say is they're in a better place. There was a reason I was saved that day. I do believe that. So, But other than that, I've been working and doing fishing with a soldier and stuff and mountain biking and trying to keep my mind occupied and off the daunting realism of what happened that day.
Talk us through your career a little bit. What year did you enlist?
I enlisted in 2004 is when I went to Paris Island.
So you were in 11 years by the time that this happened.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Retired at 14. I was medically retired at 14 years. My first duty station was Cherry Point, North Carolina, and then I went to Iraq in 2007. I spent a year there, and then I went to Johnson City, INI, which is what Chattanooga was. It's inspector instructor duty. You deal with reservists and stuff, and spent some time there. That's when I got married and started having kids and stuff. And then we moved to Hawaii, got PCSed out to Hawaii. So I was stationed out there. And then from Hawaii is when I got by name requested to go to Chattanooga. I was actually supposed to go to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, but they wanted me in Chattanooga because the previous admin chief there knew me and knew how well I knew the reserve side of the Marine Corps. So they requested me by name to come down there. So I went down there. And then once Chattanooga happened and everything, I got orders to Japan. And then Japan's when, I was diagnosed with PTSD and everything from everything that happened in Chattanooga. And then I went to Quantico to retire out and moved back to Johnson City, Tennessee once I retired.
You mentioned, that you kind of keep in contact with everyone, and you're really the only one that I still hear from, that I met during that whole process. And I appreciate you doing that, because I think it's important to keep the conversations going and checking on folks and all those things. So when you've talked to other folks who were there with you, or maybe family members of those who were killed, how are they doing? How have they processed this? What do you know about just kind of how they've been able to manage the last several years of, of all this?
Well, as you know, with death, it becomes easier with time. The memory is still there. I don't really talk to Stessarn Wyatt's wife, Lori, that much. Most of them have remarried and have moved on, but they still, I see on their Facebook that they go visit the grave sites and stuff, which you can't expect them to not move on. Yeah, it's a nightmare, but you have to realize you only have one life and you can't spend it in a dark basement somewhere wishing you had something else that happened. It's life. It's horrible what happened that day, but for the most part, everybody's moved on and they're living a good life. And we still remember those that have fallen, just like any other incident that's happened in the military history. We just got to pick up the pieces and move on.
Something hit me last year. It was on the 15th last year, and I went on a run there at Thrift Park, and I ran by the memorial. And I looked over as I running by, and there was a young woman there on a bench, clearly, having a moment and remembering something. I don't know who she was, and she probably was, I don't know, 20-ish. She was, a young woman, and it hit me at that point. I was like, these Marines, and Petty Officer Smith's children, these folks are probably grown by now. I mean, because at that point it's been 8 years, and I know a lot of them, had children. And so it hit me that, yeah, that there's a lot of people who probably think about that day in a certain way that I probably hadn't processed just yet. Have you thought about that? I know you have kids, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when everything first happened, that was the first thing that went through my mind is, man, these kids don't have a dad anymore. And I'm glad that the men that have came into their lives are really good role models for them, especially with Carson Holmquist's kids. Matthew's come in and stepped up to the plate to take care of those children, and they have one on their own. But Wyatt Holmquist, Carson's son is doing great. I mean, he's playing football and everything. I see videos of him playing football. But it's still just a dagger to the heart that these kids don't have their dads. It's really, really sad. And that kind of crushed me for the first couple of years that when after the incident, and just realizing that, and I do everything I can for my boys because they got one dad, and that's what I'm here for. So,
No doubt, man. No doubt. You mentioned earlier, you'd like to do something special next year. And we have kind of talked kind of offline, just the thoughts around when it first happened. There were events and it was a run. There were different, remembrances and these kind of things. And for the most part, a lot of that's fallen away. There's a ceremony tomorrow at the memorial. I went to something similar there last year.
mhm.
I think there's maybe a Jeep caravan kind of a thing that some local guys put together. But other than that, there's really not a lot. And now you can still drive down Pecali and see the pictures, and you can see the flags on the Veterans Bridge. And so they're reminders, obviously, but it through time, it does feel like that the events and remembrances have kind of fallen away in some way. Just any thoughts on how you think about that?
Well, I mean, with anything of that magnitude, I mean, it's going to be a strong presence at first. It's going to be, the news is going to be there, the politicians are going to be there, but with everything, it's going to go away, that's why we need to keep their memory alive. And I'm gracious to the city of Chattanooga for what they've done with the memorial and everything else, especially up there at the recruiting station and down there on the Tennessee River. I mean, they will not be forgotten because of all that stuff that's there. But does it bother me a little bit? But I don't expect. I can't expect to have a big hoorah every year for them. I'd love it. I'd love for that to happen, but it takes a lot of logistics behind all that stuff and money to put that stuff on every year. And, yeah, they are five guys that were killed in Chattanooga, but I mean, there's more Marines that get killed all over the world. So I can't expect them to have more of a celebration than anybody else. And like I said, I am grateful for what Chattanooga's done. And next year, I'd like to, for the 10-year anniversary, I'd like to get down there and just maybe grill some hot dogs and hamburgers and just have a good time hanging out. It doesn't have to be anything big. And maybe if we can get Coca-Cola to sponsor or something, some sponsor to buy hot dogs and hamburgers, I'll get down there and cook them and sweat and everything. And, I'd love to do something like that, something low key, nothing crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a real good idea to definitely do something. When you like through your life, like if you talk to someone and you mention the fact that this happened and you were there, do people remember it? Do people what's been the reaction when you talk to folks about what happened and you're now you were right there in the middle of all of it?
Yeah. And I was waiting on this question because I was actually talking to one of my buddies here at work about how many times, especially here at the VA in Johnson City Mountain Home, VA, how many people do not even know about this event that occurred in Chattanooga. When I was in Quantico, how many psychiatrists that I saw that did not know about the event in Chattanooga. And I'm like, did you live under a rock or something? Like it was pretty big on the news and everywhere. I'm sure you saw my beautiful face all over the news. So, um, yeah, I have to tell my story a lot. And I've actually done 3 active shooter training drills with 2 a rehab hospital here in Johnson City and one with my human resource association team. I just go through the whole event and what happened and everything else to make them aware of, workplace violence. Because even though it was a terrorist attack, it falls in line with workplace violence. So, um, it's yeah, I tell it a lot, and I get a lot of looks on faces like, what, that happened? I'm like, yeah.
And I don't need you to recap every detail of it, but when you talk to groups, what do you say? What is your message? What do you want people to understand about that day?
Um, my message is, I'm not going to step on the FBI's toes or anything like that, or the TBI or anybody's toes. But when I'm talking to people, it's like you don't realize what you have to do in that situation. There's no real answer of what you should do in that situation until it happens. And you might be somewhere where you can hide. You might be somewhere where you can run. You just don't know. It all depends on where you're at and when that situation unfolds and what you do. So that's what I really make them aware of. But I go through the whole thing of what happened there and all that stuff. So just making people realize that, it happens. No matter where you're at, church, the mall, always be on the lookout. And I don't want people to live in fear or anything all their lives, but it happens. You can't control it and you can't control where it's going to happen. So
Yeah, no doubt. I want to ask you this, and I know that we've talked obviously, privately about trying to navigate the VA and the
mhm.
things you've been through and all that. And like you just said, you talked to therapists and whatnot, you'd never even heard of it and all that. How I know that was a process to get your rating and all these things. How is that today? If is that all been worked out? Are you doing okay as far as all that goes?
Yeah, and I wanted to say thank you personally for helping me with all of that. It took me 5 years to get to 100% rating of VA disability. When I first got out, when I first retired, I think I was at like 85%. And then I went for an increase on my PTSD stuff because I was on medication and everything, and they decreased it. When I went for my increase, they decreased it to 10%. And I got senators and everybody involved, and the lady from, I think it was Kansas City or somewhere, wherever the board is, said I can increase it to 35, but I can't get you back to where you were without a board. And I was like, I'm done fighting this, just whatever. Um, so then that's when I got a hold of you that time, and I was like, listen, this is what I'm dealing with. I need help with this. And is our VA rating system fair? I don't think it is at all, but that's a different time for a different story. So
Understood, understood. Well, I'm glad it worked out for you. And all I did was connect you with some people who I thought might be able to help, and so anybody watches this and is having some issues, reach out or whatever. But really the main thing is contact your VSO and see if there's any avenue they've got, because a lot of times they know things that we don't know, so
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think anything else that I didn't ask you. Just, I guess, just this, in closing this out. It's just anybody watching this that you want them to understand something about your experience, about these 5 men who lost their lives that day, about any of it. What do you want people to understand as far as, like you said, that you can't prepare for it. You never know what's going to happen, but boy, it can happen. And this was very specific, right? This was not just an active shooter, it's a terrorist attack. It's a legitimate terrorist attack, and a town that doesn't have a big military presence. It doesn't have, shocking to all of us who are, around it, and so there's a lot of details to it. But what do you hope people
Yeah.
that think about and remember?
Well, I mean, just realize, like you said, it was a terrorist attack. It was actually, besides Fort Hood, that was a military guy that was actually went jihadist, but and the actual first terrorist attack on U.S. soil on a military base. And a lot of people don't realize that. Chattanooga, even though it's a reserve center, it's still a military base. Um, and just realize that you know you you are going to work, you are going wherever you do in your daily lives, and you may not come home. That's just either in a car wreck or something else. So hug the ones you love. Do everything you can for those that you love, that you're with, for your kids. You know, like we said at first, it's horrible that, you know, those kids are not being raised up with their original father. I'm glad the men have stepped into that father role, but just love the ones you love and help who you can help. You never know what bad day people are having. Just be there for somebody, you know, especially these veterans out there that are struggling. A lot of them can't come to cope with things like I have. You know, I think I've done a pretty good job at managing my anxiety and my depression and everything. And I can't say I haven't been down that road, because I have, but you know, just understand people and love each other. You know, I mean, no matter who you are or what you're doing, you know, treat everybody with fairness and love and respect.